Most people do not fail with this pest powder because it is weak. They fail because they use it in the exact way that makes it look weak. They pour thick white lines where insects never wanted to travel in the first place. They spread it into damp corners where it cannot do its best work. They dust huge areas that feel active to a human eye, then ignore the tight hidden roots where the real movement is happening. A few days pass, the bugs are still there, and the conclusion is always the same. This stuff does not work. Primera, need something stronger. That mistake wastes money, wastes time, and keeps the infestation alive while you think you are already fighting it. Worse than that, it teaches the wrong lesson. It teaches people to trust force more than placement, and dramatic action more than understanding the real problem inside the house in Diaspido. I want to show you what this powder really does, where it works, where it fails, and the mistakes that make people think it is useless when the real problem is how they used it. The powder is Diatomaceous Earth, usually called D. On the shelf, it looks harmless, soft, pale, almost like chalk. That is exactly why people misunderstand. It's so key. They expect pest control to look chemical. They expect to smell, a warning, a fast result, and some sign that something powerful is happening. D is not that kind of tool. It does not work by poisoning insects the way most people imagine pest control works. It works physically. At a microscopic level, D is made from fossilized remains of tiny organisms with silica shells. To your fingers, it feels soft and fine. To a crawling insect, it is a dry, abrasive surface that damages the protective outer layer the insect depends on to hold moisture. Once that protection is compromised, the insect starts drying out. Not instantly, not dramatically, but steadily. That is the first big shift you need to make. DE is not a chemical knockdown. It is not a panic button. It is a dry, mechanical barrier. If you think like poison, you will use it wrong. If you think like a barrier, placement starts making sense. So where does it make the most sense? Dry, indoor areas, protected travel routes, narrow paths where crawling pests move again and again without much disturbance. That means behind furniture along baseboards, around plumbing penetrations, at the back edge of lower cabinets, behind the refrigerator, beneath the stove. Area stays dry along the inside lip of a pantry shelf, near the gap where a pipe enters a wall, or along a dry crack by a threshold. In other words, the places insects treat like roads, not the places humans notice first. That is why a human sees the open floor and thinks area. A bug sees the edge and thinks safety. A human sees a thick white line and thinks strength. Boog may avoid the obvious pile. Now let's talk about what D does not do, because that part matters just as much as what it does well. It does not work well in wet conditions. It is not the right answer for surfaces that stay damp. Get mopped often, build up condensation, or keep taking on moisture from leaks, steam, or poor ventilation. It does not remove the food source. It does not stop a slow leak. It does not seal an entry gap. It does not kill eggs, and it does not replace basic sanitation. That list matters because people get angry at the wrong thing. They use D on top of bad conditions, then blame D for failing. But if a house is still feeding insects, still giving them water, and still giving them safe travel routes, the problem is bigger than the powder. That is not a weakness of the tool. That is a failure of the system around it, and rootfall state is always about systems, not panic, not magic. Control starts when you understand the order of the problem. So let's talk about what right use actually looks like. You are not trying to blanket the room. You are not trying to turn the house white. You are trying to leave a thin, dry film where insects are already likely to pass. That means light application. Thin enough that it barely looks like anything is there. Thick, visible piles may feel powerful, but that does not mean they are giving you better results. They are often wasteful, easy to disturb, and placed more for emotional comfort than real control. A thin dusting in the right place beats a thick band in the wrong place every time. Think about the way pests move when the house goes quiet. They hug edges. They move under lips, behind objects, along shadows, inside cracks near wall-floor junctions, around cabinet seams, beside plumbing lines, and through spaces that stay undisturbed for long stretches of time. That is where D belongs, not in the middle of the room, not across every visible surface. The first is the simple dry root barrier. This is a visible but light dusting placed on a specific path where you already know pests are moving. A cabinet back edge, a baseboard behind storage bins, a dry strip beneath a sink cabinet after the leak problem is fixed, the inside corner of a pantry shelf, the quiet crack beside a pipe or along a threshold. This method works best when the pest traffic is predictable and the area stays dry. The second is hidden void placement. This is often even better because the powder stays undisturbed longer. Behind large appliances, inside dry utility gaps, beneath fixed structures, inside protected wall spaces where insects move but people do not clean every day. When it stays dry and untouched, it has a much better chance to keep doing its job. Now let's get to the deadly mistakes, because this is where most people quietly lose control and never understand why the problem keeps coming back. The first deadly mistake is using the wrong kind. For household pest control, you want food-grade Diatomaceous Earth labeled for that type of hose. Pool filter material is not the same thing. And this is not an area for guessing. Read the label. Start with the right material. The second deadly mistake is using too much. This is probably the most common failure. People pour thick white bands because more product feels like more force. It looks active. It looks serious, but that is human logic, not insect logic. Thick piles are messy, easy to spot, easy to disturb, and often badly placed. You are not trying to impress yourself. You are trying to create likely contact. The third deadly mistake is using it in damp areas and expecting dry performance. This powder depends on dryness to do its best work. If the corner stays humid, if the sink cabinet still has a leak, if your bathroom keeps building condensation, or if mop water keeps touching the treatment area, then moisture is still winning the first battle. Powder on top of a wet problem is not control. It is a reaction to a condition you still have not fixed. The fourth deadly mistake is treating the root while leaving the reward. This is how infestations survive. You dust behind the trash can, but there is still grease and food residue at the floor edge. You treat the pantry corner, but spilled grain, sugar, dust, and clutter remain in the back. You place powder under the sink, but pet food still sits out overnight, and the water bowl keeps splashing nearby. D can help kill insects that move through it. It cannot outwork a house that keeps feeding them. The fifth deadly mistake is expecting speed from a method that was never meant to be dramatic. D is slower. It works over time through contact. That means many people sabotage it before it has a fair chance to pay off. They vacuum too soon. They wipe the edge clean. They irreaptly, randomly without fixing placement. Or they get nervous after a day or two and change methods before the setup has time to work. The sixth deadly mistake is thinking one product replaces a full control system. It does not. Pest control is a sequence. Remove food, remove water, reduce clutter, limit hidden spots, seal entry points, then use the right control on the right route. D belongs inside that sequence. It does not replace that sequence. That is the difference between people who keep fighting the same pest problem for months and people who finally break the cycle. If you want to think about your house correctly, stop asking where should I dump the powder. Ask these three questions instead. Where are they feeding? Where are they getting water? Where are they traveling? That is the real map of the infestation. The feeding zone might be pantry crumbs, grease under appliances, pet bowls, trash residue, unsealed dry goods, or forgotten corners where dust and food mix into a quiet food source. The water zone might be a slow leak, plant trays, damp wood, condensation, poor ventilation, splash around a pet dish, or standing moisture under something that rarely gets moved. The travel route is the line connecting those zones to hidden shelter points where insects feel safe. Once you see those three things clearly, placement becomes smarter immediately. You stop dusting emotionally. You start dusting with intent. And there is one more detail most people get backward. Clean first, dust second. If you clean after applying D, you remove the barrier you just built. So do the real work first. Remove the crumb. Wipe the grease. Dry the moisture. Fix the leak if you can. Reduce the clutter. Throw out badly infested packaging when necessary. Then place a thin, dry treatment where the root still remains. Now let's answer the question that decides whether D is even the right tool for your situation. When does it make the most sense? It makes sense when you want a low-cost, low-complexity control method for crawling pests in dry indoor areas. It makes sense when the pest traffic follows repeatable paths and you want a method that can keep working quietly without constant reapplication as long as the area stays dry and undisturbed. It makes sense when you want to reduce dependency on harsher repeated treatments and build more control into the way the house is managed. When does it make less sense? When the infestation is severe across multiple rooms and conditions. When sanitation is poor and food residue is everywhere. When moisture is still feeding the pest pressure every day. When eggs are hatching faster than active movement is being controlled. When there are structural problems you have not addressed. When you are trying to solve a widespread issue with a light root treatment and expecting it to perform like a total reset. In those situations, D may still help, but it is not the whole fix. There is also a mindset problem here that is worth saying out loud. A lot of people want pest control to feel like revenge. They want one strong action that proves they are back in charge. That feeling is understandable, but it leads to bad choices. You over-apply. You mix methods without a plan. Chase. Insect you can see and ignore the condition that keeps creating the next one. Real control is calmer than that. That is why it fits this channel so well. It is cheap, it is simple, it can be useful, but only if you stop treating the house like a battlefield and start treating it like a system. So let's lock this in. Clearly, D works by damaging the insect's outer protection and helping dry it out. It works best in dry, protected travel routes. A thin dusting is usually better than a thick, visible pile. It does not solve eggs, moisture, food access, poor sanitation, or entry points by itself. And if you treat the path without changing the conditions, the problem usually returns. Because most pest problems are not just insect problems, they are house condition problems. Moisture, food access, shelter, clutter, entry, wrong order, bad placement. Poor storage, small sanitation failures that look harmless until they keep feeding the same cycle again and again. If this helped you, leave a comment with the first pest that usually shows up in your house or your season. Ants, roaches, silverfish, pantry pests, something else. That tells me what pressure you are dealing with and what we should break down next, because killing the bug is only half the fight. The deeper a fight is controlling the conditions that let contamination, pests, and repeat infestation rebuild inside a home in the first place. That is where we go next, because once you understand how to slow and stop the movement, the next step is learning how to stop the house from feeding the infestation at all. If you want low-cost survival systems that are sharp, practical, and built for real homes, stay with Rootfall State,